Hello and welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with Jon Uhler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Today on the show, Jon, Dr. Ann, Gillies, as well as Denise are all stopping in. We've put this session together because of the tragic incident that happened yesterday in Nashville. More to come right after these.
In this age of gender confusion, it's difficult to find advice you can trust to help protect your child from those who would seek to unduly influence them, setting them up to be manipulated and exploited. On Unmasking the Trans Movement, we discuss, educate, and deliver the info parents want and need to help their children, grandchildren, and even themselves. Each week, we connect you with the clinical professionals and subject matter experts who understand what this movement is all about and how to navigate around this disturbing mental health issue. Join UnMaskingTheTransMovement.com for our next webinar, where Jon Uhler, Dr. Ann Gillies, and our clinical experts provide the advice you can trust to help protect your child from those who would seek to unduly influence them and set them up to be manipulated and exploited within the trans movement. Our webinars provide access to supporting groups discussing the issues you want to talk about with other parents and experts alike. Learn to understand how the language has changed, stay up to date on this new lingo, and be able to have a rational, understanding conversation with your child who might be getting dragged into, sorry for the pun, this evil trans agenda. Our mission is clear: to unmask the deception and protect the most vulnerable among us. For webinar dates, times, and pricing, please visit our website at unmaskingthetransmovement.com/webinars.
Welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with Jon Uhler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Today on the show, Jon, Dr. Ann, and Denise are here to talk all about what happened yesterday, the tragic incident that occurred in Nashville, Tennessee, at a school of elementary kids. 3 children, 9 years and younger, shot dead, murdered by a trans individual who went through a transition recently that definitely left a lot of mental health issues and some real confusion and some real evil in the wake. The 3 children weren't all that passed away yesterday. There were also 3 adults as well. Total of 6. Our heart goes out to all of those parents who are suffering today, the school staff, and the heroic efforts by the Nashville police force to not hold back, not sit back or stand back from what went on at other school shootings recently, where they waited a half an hour or 45 minutes to even get in a school. These guys took control yesterday. They got in there and they took out that shooter. With that, let's bring in Jon Uhler, who's an expert in all of this. He deals in the jail system constantly, daily. He deals with pedophiles, all under incarceration. And Jon is going to bring a perspective on this today that I think is going to help, well, a lot of people. It won't just help the parents, won't just help the teachers. This is going to help you as moms and dads, grandparents. You need to get involved in this evil movement in a way that stops it. With that, let's bring in Jon Uhler right now, who's an expert. Jon, thanks a lot for being here today. A tragic situation we had yesterday. Obviously, you being the expert that you are in this field, a lot happened. A lot happened prior to yesterday. A lot happened yesterday itself as well. I don't even know. I mean, we're all confused at this point. There's so many different perspectives, so many different things that happened yesterday that makes us question whether it was a boy or a girl, whether it was somebody who was pumped up with testosterone. There's just so many issues. Help us break this down, Jon, in a way that is going to not only educate, but provide some healing as well today.
Yeah, Brad, thank you. And what this certainly highlights is that the trans movement, those that have pushed this grand scheme, they have unleashed upon society now a very dangerous situation. I think it is safe to say now that the trans movement, those that are pushing this upon vulnerable young people that grow into vulnerable young adults, they have unleashed a Frankenstein's monster. They have opened a Pandora's box.
Would you say it was just a matter of time until this happened, Jon?
Correct. Now, it'll really come down to, there's a lot of issues, and we're going to unpack those. And we have our fellow expert as well, Dr. Ann Gillies, who's with us, because she and I are also, what applies here is we're also trauma therapists. So there's so much trauma now involved in this, the people that were there, the parents, the kids. I mean, on so many levels, we here on Unmasking the Trans Movement can unpack this. And we have Denise, and Denise is a mother. She has been back. She's our repeat guest because she is such a well-informed, she's a detective, as it were. She's our own investigator. That's and right. So she has uncovered what has been really pumped into the minds of young people through all this, the stuff that's in schools. And then she was sharing with us. And so we will also have her share from her own experience what it was like being on hormones as far as having those adjusted. And so it's going to be an extremely important topic and unfortunately very timely. So Dr. Ann Gillies, thank you for being with us. This is a horrific situation.
It is certainly, Jon, and it's something that we really do need to unpack. I totally agree. There's several layers here, and I just saw a report that that there needs to be an investigation as a hate crime. So that's another layer, right? But Denise, we're going to talk about testosterone, but we also need to look at the vulnerability of this individual when she was very young. And of course, it's all pointing, mainstream media is talking about, Christian parents rejecting her, and the Christian school that she's in, and all of that kind of thing. But here's a young girl who was on the autism spectrum. Don't we see that regularly with these individuals, these children that are pushed into transitioning, the young girls, pre-existing mental health issues, psychosis, all kinds of things like that. And also autism. And then instead of treating that, and now correct me if I'm wrong, but I also think I read something about her being sexually abused as a child. Well, there you have the trauma that as professionals, we are not allowed to treat. We're not allowed to treat these young girls in the area of their traumas because that would be called conversion therapy, because if we treated the trauma, they may not decide to transition. So we have a mess with this. And this, Denise, I want you to share some of what we were talking about because it's pretty scary. You've been reading some other information. So I guess what I would say, just start wherever you want, but let's not forget to focus at some point on the testosterone and the levels, because that is really, really important.
Sure. So we haven't really gotten into why I jumped in and yanked my daughter out of this meat grinder of a system that we have in the public school. Part of it was my insight into hormones. I've been watching, as she would say, my friend is trans, or my, this many kids in my class are trans. And back then I didn't really understand how much they were talking about the puberty blockers and the hormones. I just thought, okay, this is about social transition. Now I understand how that's the logical next step. And that's where it's always headed once you socially transition. The reason I was so clued into this is because I keep hearing people talk about professionals say puberty blockers are harmless and cross-sex hormones are reversible. And I know from my experience that that is not true. When I was 10 years old, I was started on birth control pills. As we were talking last time, I started my period at a very young age. had a lot of problems that went along with that. It turns out I have a genetic situation that has to do with how I metabolize folic acid. So anytime I take supplemental folic acid, it can cause mood problems. There's a lot to unpack there, but because of that, I was put on birth control pills to take the symptoms down and keep everything regular, keep me from getting anemic. And so I was on synthetic hormones from the age of 10 until 30 when I had my first pregnancy. And I breastfed all of my children. And there was a thing that would happen as soon as my children would start eating their first solid food, I would tank into what looked like postpartum depression. I would not be able to get up off the floor. My legs would get weak. My brain would get foggy. It would present a little bit like psychosis. So I finally found a doctor who figured out what was going on. And so he said, what's happening is your estrogen is tanking when your child starts eating regular food because you're not nursing as much. And that flips a switch, right? And your estrogen plummets. So he put me on estrogen. And obviously you can't stay on unopposed estrogen for too long. The next thing they did was say, okay, well, with estrogen, you can't have that unaccompanied, so you have to have progesterone and testosterone with that. He's very conservative. We don't want to inject anything. We don't want to do anything by mouth. We want as bioidentical as possible. And he was trying to balance my hormones. And there was a time that my testosterone got a little high. And I became aware of it because I was raging. It was a combination of sexual and aggressive energy where I didn't know if I wanted to have sex with something or beat it to death. It was like this sexual rage.
So tell us just how much testosterone you were on.
That's 2 milligrams.
2 milligrams. So wait till
0.2 milligrams topically every day.
0.2.
That's 0.2 that I take topically, and it's designed to build.
Right.
Another experience I had is I started noticing women's bodies, and I had never had that experience. I was so sexually charged all the time, and you'd think as a woman, you would think, well, that's great. That's working out for everybody. But it was uncomfortable and distracting. I was noticing the way that a woman's body goes from her shoulder to the indention of her waist to her hip. And I was seeing that as beautiful. And I'd never experienced anything like that before. I was appreciating it like in the way that you would appreciate art. So my husband came home and I said, I don't know what to do with myself. Like, it's not safe for me to be around the kids because I felt so aggressive. I started kickboxing to kind of deal with that. And I was tearing up my knuckles kickboxing. It was just this, like, I couldn't get it out of me, this aggression. And because my husband's a physician and he knew what was going on, he said, honey, you're roid raging. Like, this is what's happening. It was a couple of years later that I was listening to a story on NPR, and Katie Herzog brought this up on Barry Weiss's podcast a little while back. It was the first person I ever heard reference it. And they were interviewing a woman. Now, this was before this became such a politically charged topic. They were interviewing a woman who was attempting to transition. And she reached a point where she felt herself looking at women on the subway as in a predatory way. And that's what talked her out of transitioning. She went in and said, I don't want the hormones anymore. That's not what I want to be. So it was causing changes in the way that she saw things and her brain function and the feelings associated with that. And so when I saw this trans stuff come up, I'm hearing physicians lie about this. Yes. I know this from my experience, the effect that this has on your body. And I'll tell you, some of these changes are not reversible. I could stop these hormones today and I would have those changes for the rest of my life. So when they tell you it's reversible, it's just a pause. It doesn't cause anything psychologically. I know that they're lying. And so that's why I said, okay, what's the agenda behind this? Why are they lying? Why are we all pretending? Why are we thinking magically? Why has this suddenly become so important that we're all forgetting what we know, changing our language, pretending and putting children at risk?
Right. And you're absolutely right. And we've been putting children at risk for a long time. Actually, and I was just reading to you a little while ago, Dr. Sue Bradley from Canada has actually produced a paper that said we were wrong. We were wrong. And she talks about the ramifications of puberty blockers. She doesn't go into the hormones, but talking about the cognitive disability that's coming from the puberty blockers themselves, and then bone density problems. I mean, we know there's heart issues, there's all kinds of other stuff, but let's focus on the testosterone. Let's go back. You were on 0.2 milligram topically.
Yes.
You told me a few minutes ago how much a young girl transitioning to male. So this can be a girl who is 13, 12, 13, into their, well, they're probably on puberty blockers still then, but once they go to the hormones, once they transition from the puberty blockers into the hormones. So how many milligrams? How many times a week?
Per the National Institute of Health, their guidelines, the recommended dosage of intramuscular testosterone enanthate is 50 to 100 milligrams every week, or 100 to 200 milligrams every 2 weeks.
That is just appalling.
Yes.
Appalling. Given your experience and what you had at 0.2 milligrams. So let's go back.
As a grown woman.
As a grown woman, yes. As a grown woman, you're not a teenager who's already having some cognitive issues because of the puberty blockers, doesn't think straight, doesn't understand. There's a lot of stuff happening. 50 to 100 milligrams of testosterone being shot into this young girl's body, circulating. And then we come to the Nashville shooter. What do you think was going on? And Jon, you're going to want to talk about this too, because there is something that is so horrific that a young woman transitioning to be the opposite sex, trying to be the opposite sex, would actually murder children and other adults. Like, how often have we ever seen women murder children in a school system? I know there's some mothers that have murdered their own children. I get that. I mean, it's horrible, but this is a brand new situation.
Yeah, it's going to be a first that I know of. Denise, let me ask this question. This will be important for parents as well as hopefully any teens that are going to watch this. You mentioned about Planned Parenthood, that a young woman can go into Planned Parenthood. So again, remind parents, what dosage were you on that you felt you were going crazy and super aggressive versus then if a young person walks into Planned Parenthood, what are they going to get? So what dosage were you on and what can a kid get from Planned Parenthood?
So I was on 0.2 milligrams topically once a day. When I was researching Planned Parenthood, what they're giving these young girls who come in is 20 milligrams intramuscular.
I mean, easily 20 times. I don't, I'm not a mathematician, but that, 0.2 versus 20.
Well, and the other thing I think is important to note is it took a long time for this to build. When I first started it, I remember saying to my husband, I feel normal for the first time. You get feelings of euphoria. I've
heard that described exactly that way, that these kids feel great.
But as it goes and it starts to build up into your system, then it gets uncomfortable. I happen to live with a physician and be under the care of a physician who does this. If you're a teenage girl and you go into Planned Parenthood and you get this injection, A, you can't remove it. It's been injected into your muscle. You can't back off. It's in your body circulating. B, you have no physician looking after you.
That's atrocious. That's atrocious to me, because we are not taking care of these children. We are just feeding them to the wolves.
And you're sexually aggressive at that point.
Yes.
As a 14-year-old female.
Wow.
Testosterone obviously affects the body, but does it also affect the mind?
Only for me, it was only in the way that I was looking at things. It was more a physical state. I said, I feel like I have something in me that needs to come out and I can't get it out. The closest thing I can relate it to, and this would be a more mild presentation, is if you've ever gotten way too much caffeine on board and you feel like you just can't, you got to move, you can't get it out, and it's so uncomfortable.
Just sounds like being a man to me. You know, like we have that. That's why I guess our makeup.
It also gave me a brand new appreciation of those manly qualities, and the idea of, you know, I watched the video of this young woman in this school, and she was behaving like a hunter. You don't see women behaving like they're hunting. That's masculine.
Do you think she had some training?
I'm quite sure she had some training.
Because I'm thinking just handling those guns. I mean, you know,
I can't fire that weapon on my feet. I have to sit down to fire that weapon. I can't fire it with accuracy unless I'm sitting down. Now, I haven't fired what she has. My husband has a hunting rifle that I have fired, and it kicked my tail. So to fire it that many times,
yep,
standing, that was pretty shocking to me.
Yeah, and what's also interesting, and we were all discussing this before we started recording this, which is I was of the impression, and it's still not clear in my mind, so that adds to the overall topic, which is, you know, is this a biological male? Is this an XY that became a female, or is this an XX that was becoming a male? It matters.
I don't know what this is at this point.
Look at what's happened in our society, right? This is all the result of this trans deception, this trans movement. That's why we're unmasking this, because there are very real world practical concerns now, including this is mass murder.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? This is a school shooting of women and children. So regardless of what the actual chromosomal makeup of this individual, and there's implications either way, that if it was a male, then you have, unfortunately, typical male pattern violence. But if this is a female, a natal female, I hate this terminology stuff. This was an XX chromosome individual. I've never seen this kind of thing before. So now we have created, as it were, and this is not a pejorative statement, we've created a Frankenstein's monster, because I work in a prison system. I understand male violence that looks like that, and it ain't pretty. But what do you do now if we've unleashed, because the vast majority of young people that are transitioning are females? If what you're telling me is this is, meaning whoever is saying, whatever actual gender, we're going to find out the biological nature of this individual. If what we're now learning is that this stuff that the trans movement can create, male pattern violence, and there are more females on this stuff longer, then we have potentially an incredible army of emotionally reactive, emotionally unstable, mentally unstable females that are now acting like men and exhibiting male pattern violence that are going after women and children. We've unleashed the whirlwind.
Except males don't put colorful stickers on their weapons. Did you see the photo of the weapon with the colorful sticker on it?
No, but who knows, right? That's the whole thing. We don't know. I just saw a picture of this person's bedroom, and it looked like a guy's. It was all disheveled. Now, there's a very gender typical, correct. Most girls are a little bit more orderly. It looked like a guy's dorm room as they were moving in or out. And so if that's a female, all the more. And somebody's going to say, gender stereotypical. Yeah. You know, right. You have, who is it in the marriage that typically complains that so-and-so won't pick up their underwear? It's typically the wife that's complaining about the guy. He won't pick it up and put it in the clothes hamper. So you don't want to create a bunch of those kind of male characteristics. You don't want to multiply that. Dr. Ann, you were going to say something.
Exactly. Well, you were saying that this is stereotypical, but you see, this is what these trans women are looking for. They're trying to accomplish this cross-sex identity. And so when you put all this testosterone into their system, here they are behaving in a manner like a man would. And this is the whole thing that Denise is talking about. Denise, I was just thinking, maybe we can help clear this up a little bit. Was she a girl? Was she a boy? Natally? And I think there's some certainly pictures, I think you said on Daily Mail, of her as a child. So it looks to me, sorry, John, you may be wrong here, but it looks to me she was a girl. Do you have those pictures?
Do you have them on the Daily Mail, Brad?
No, I'm sorry, I don't have those images. We're getting down to our last few minutes of this episode. It went really quickly because there's just so much to talk about and discuss. One thing I will pull those pictures up for episode 2, part 2.
Okay.
One of the things that I do have in front of me, and I think it's important to note this, and I think it's going to bring some clarity to what you were just talking about. I'm going to read Audrey's or Aiden's posts leading up to yesterday's situation. This is something that was posted through Microsoft, MSN. Okay. So basically, that post I made on here about you, that was basically a suicide note, she says. I'm planning to die today. This is not a joke. All in capital letters. You'll probably hear about me on the news after I die. This is my last goodbye. I love you. See you again in another life. The signature now, she signed it Audrey. Underneath, it was Aiden in parentheses. Okay? Her friend replies, Audrey, you have so much more life to live. I pray God keeps and covers you. I know, but I don't want to live, Audrey says. I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to upset you or get attention. I just need to die. I wanted to tell you first because you are the most beautiful person I've ever seen and known all my life. It sounds to me like Audrey is a biological female who they were transitioning into being a male. And at that point, the testosterone and all of this indoctrination, all of this continued push from teachers, from principals, from school divisions, from ministers of education to health professionals, enough already. Enough already. Stop harming our children. With that, we're going to wrap up this episode right here on Unmasking the Trans Movement. I'm Brad Wilder. On behalf of Jon Uhler, Dr. Ann Gillies, and Denise, thanks for being here. Remember, it's not our kids' fight, it's our fight. We'll see you next time.